Live from the middle of Midtown Toronto at CNIB headquarters on Bayview Avenue. This is the 2025 federal election candidates debate on disability issues. My name is David Lepofsky, and I have the joy of introducing this event. I've been given 2 minutes, and so when my 2 minutes is up, hold up a number, and if I see it, I'm going to stop talking. Democracy is very much teetering around the world. We have an election in Canada. Tonight is an exercise of Canadian democracy in action. Our newspapers, radio stations, and TV reports are full of reports and coverage of Donald Trump's tariffs and the horrific trade war that we are the victims of. This is a hugely important issue in this election, but it is not the only issue in this election. Of Canada's population, fully 8 million people have disabilities, and all the rest will have disabilities later. There are critical issues in this election that are important. The Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Alliance, which I have the privilege of serving as chair, along with 27 other organizations, disability organizations, have written all the party leaders asking them to make the Accessible Canada Pledge, to tell us what they'll do to tear down barriers that the federal government can address, to end the horrific mistreatment of passengers with disabilities on Canadian Airlines, to ensure that people with disabilities living in poverty are lifted out of poverty, because $200 a month won't do it. We need to have our voices heard, and tonight, 15 disability organizations working at warp speed over less than 2 weeks have put together this event to hear from all the parties. Now, you're going to hear in just a minute from our moderator, who will give you the rules and who will introduce the candidates. But I want to make a few things clear at the outset. Number one, this is a totally non-partisan event. And the organizations who are sponsoring this organization are fully non-partisan organizations. We Could people please mute their microphones, because we are hearing them, including, I think, a screen reader. Thank you. We want to hear from all the parties. We invited all the parties. Now, the Bloc Quebecois is not running anyone in Ontario, and they did not answer our request. The NDP, the Liberals, and the Greens have all agreed to send a candidate. They're all here. We appreciate their taking the time away from knocking on doors in their hotly contested ridings to speak to all of us. We are indebted to you. We are deeply let down that any party did not decide to attend. We reached out to the Conservative Party more than once. We regret that they are not here to tell us what their party would do for Canadians with disabilities if elected to power. We hope they will share that information with voters, and we would be happy to make it public if we receive it after this debate. Let me introduce our moderator. Mr. David Ryder has one great thing to his credit and one thing you should feel sorry for. To his credit, he is excellent, superb veteran journalist at the Toronto Star. You should feel sorry because he had to suffer through an entire course of freedom of expression at the UT Faculty of Law with me as its teacher. He has survived. I look forward, as do you all, to hearing from David, to hearing from the candidates. So enough of me, and now it's on to the candidates and the debate. David, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you, David Lepofsky. I'm honored to serve as your moderator tonight. I'm also grateful to CNIB for hosting us. In thanking them, I want to acknowledge that the land we are on is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee speaking nations, including the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and Mohawk, as well as the Mississaugas of the Credit. All of us, including partner organizations that have put this event together, are grateful to have the opportunity to bring this event to this space and are collectively committed to a path of truth and reconciliation. As organizers, we also want to acknowledge that all persons, regardless of their abilities or disabilities, contribute to the rich makeup of our world. I'm honored to serve as your moderator, and I'm very pleased that it's on this topic. Someone I love very much is dealing with a mental health disability, and in trying to help them get even basic accommodations from their university, I'm getting the tiniest taste of the fight that many of you have day in and day out just to get equality of opportunity. So I'm grateful to the organizers for inviting me and for you being here and in person and online. I'm going to go through some logistics. There's a little bit here, but bear with me. First is light kosher snacks and drinks are available at the back, so please help yourself. We have attendant care available on site for those who need it. Please raise your hand to get the attention of one of our organizers if you can, or otherwise signal us and we will assist you. Accessible washrooms are along the hallway just outside the main hall. Disability and issues can be emotional. We have 2 RENA social workers on site. If you'd like to speak to someone, Lindsay Gold and Haley Wine, please give us a wave. There they are. Thank you, ladies. If you'd like to speak to Haley or Lindsay, please raise your hand or otherwise get the attention of one of our volunteers and one of our organizers will come to you. The consortium of nonpartisan disability organizations that have arranged tonight's debate has set these ground rules. First, Canada's 5 major federal political parties were invited to participate to this event. Those attending are, for the Green Party, Mike Morris of Kitchener Centre. You can clap, that's okay. Thank you for being here. For the Liberal Party, joining us online is Leanne Kotler from Thornhill. And for the NDP, we have George Wedge from Scarborough-Woburn. As David mentioned earlier, but just to get on the record, that the Conservative Party and the Bloc Quebecois were both invited and both declined to send a candidate. We will begin with each candidate having 3 minutes to introduce themselves and to answer one simple question from me, which will be, what will your party do if elected for people with disabilities in Canada? I'm going to be coming back to that and I'll repeat it in a couple of minutes. Following those opening remarks, we will rotate questions as follows. 1 from pre-submitted questions. During registration, we asked if you had questions for candidates. We received a lot of questions that have been pre-submitted, and the organizing team has reviewed all submissions and has done its best to select a representative cross-section of questions that represent the disability community. Next, we will select a question from someone here in attendance. When we arrive, please raise your hand or signal one of our volunteers around the room. We are an informal and accommodating bunch. We're here to make it work for everyone. You will need to go to the one microphone, which is on our Zoom camera. The mic will not come to you, but if you need assistance getting to the mic, our team will do their best. Each person asking a question gets 1 minute maximum to ask. If a person needs more time as an accommodation to their disability, of course, I will allow that. But I have been asked to be strict with time so that we can get as many questions in as possible. So if about 30 seconds in, it sounds like you're not quite asking your question or maybe giving a preamble or a statement, I might give you a polite nudge to get to the question so that we can hear from other people as well. We have American Sign Language interpreters online for those who want to ask questions via ASL. Thank you to Francine Gillis and Catherine Bazin, I hope I'm saying that correctly, for your service tonight. Thank you to the Arch Disability Law Center for funding ASL live captioning tonight. The captionist is Lisa Lamberti. Then we will select a question from those watching on Zoom and read questions from the chat. For those who would like to ask their questions via ASL online, please indicate so in the chat and we'll ask our on-site ASL translator to view the question and interpret aloud to our candidates. Outside of the first question, candidates have not seen the questions in advance. If a question identifies a specific candidate, that you want to answer, I will direct it to that candidate. If it's open to everyone, I will myself direct it to anyone who wants to answer. I will tell candidates how long they have to answer. We've said roughly 90 seconds. And I will allocate time based on the question itself. So if you need a bit more time to develop it, I'll be lenient, but we're trying to keep as many questions and answers as we can. The organizers have given me the discretion to slip in a few questions of my own. If a candidate answering does not seem to be giving a direct answer, I may give them a delicate nudge to say, but answer the question, which I get to do in my job a lot. At home sometimes too, but I also get it back at me. When we get near the end, I will call on each candidate to answer in one short, sharp, engaging minute about why you should vote for their party. So we already applauded for our candidates, but I always say, I think sticking your neck out and running for office is a brave, wonderful part of democracy. So let's give them another round of applause before we get into the question. So we are going to start. And again, the first question is, what will your party do if elected for people with disabilities in Canada? And we're going to start with Mike first.
David, congrats to the organizers for making this work with all the technology involved. Again, earlier I was just saying thank you. This is a lot of work to put this together. It's so important that Canadians and folks with disabilities get accountability in advance of April 28th. And debates like this are a really important way to ensure that that happens. I also want to say that all throughout the last almost 4 years of this parliamentary session, the organizations that are involved in hosting tonight's debate were also involved in making sure that parliamentarians heard from the disability community and were active throughout that time. And I appreciate them for that. I've learned a lot from them over the last number of years. To directly answer the question, you heard earlier about this Accessible Canada pledge. I spoke with both co-leaders of the Green Party of Canada. They assured me before tonight's debate that they fully support all three elements of the Accessible Canada pledge, that being both advancing and moving forward on commitments around the Accessible Canada Act. Secondly, doing far better for folks with disabilities traveling by air. And of course, fixing and fully funding the Canada Disability Benefit, of which I'm sure we'll speak about more throughout the evening. If I'm honest with you all though, it's not a surprise or a shock to share, Greens will not be forming government after this election. And so I think more constructive and meaningful to answer this question for you all is to say that if you elect Greens across the country, what you will get are champions for the disability community, because Greens are champions for their communities first and foremost. Ahead of partisan sniping and all of the silliness of politics, as Greens, we show up trying to get things done for our communities, and particularly for those whose voices are not heard often enough. And it is very clear that that is the case when it comes to the disability community. And it's one of the reasons why, as the Member of Parliament for Kitchener Centre, in this last parliamentary session, I have spent as much time, energy, and focus as I did, because my job is to lift up the voices of folks with disabilities living in poverty in my community, disproportionately so. And that is what, should we have a larger caucus of Greens after this next election, I would look forward to working with them alongside colleagues in other parties as we did in this last session to make sure we actually get results. Because one of those results is why, while the Canada Disability Benefit is completely inadequate, and I'm sure we'll probably talk more about it, regardless of what happens in this election, on May 1st, applications will open, and that is as a result of those who were pushing in Parliament for it, while being very clear just how insufficient it is. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Leanne Cutler from the Liberal Party running in Thornhill. And again, the question is, so you can introduce yourself if you like. And the question is, what will your party do if elected for people with disabilities in Canada?
Hi, I'm Leanne Cutler. I am the Liberal Party candidate for Thornhill. I'm formerly a journalist at TVO, recently at The Agenda with Steve Paikin. My apologies for not being there in person, but thank you for zooming me in, and my apologies if I have a coughing fit at any moment. Unlike Mike, it's highly likely that the Liberal Party will form the next government. Unlike Mike, the Liberal Party has not yet released its platform. So I'm not going to talk about what's in the platform. I will, however, talk about what is coming down the line and what was going on in Parliament and within the Liberal Party with respect to people with disabilities when Parliament was dissolved. David Lepofsky and Mike have already mentioned the Canada Disability Benefit. That will roll out in July. And although both David and Mike have talked about how insufficient it is, I do want to talk about what a milestone it is. It is a new addition to Canada's social safety net. It is a monthly payment for those in the working age of between 18 and 65. It fills a very important gap and addresses a very well-known fact that people with disabilities are poor, almost double the rates of people without disabilities, and those rates are awful. So this benefit will have a positive impact on hundreds of thousands of Canadians with disabilities. And yes, here is the eyes wide open part. The maximum amount to begin with will be about $200. At this point, that is not enough, and we need to do more. It's a very good start. It represents about $5 to $6 billion per year in our budget. I do want to mention that the CNIB was very helpful in helping create this benefit. So this is coming in July. If I am elected, when I unseat Melissa Lantsman, I will be nudging Prime Minister Carney to up that amount. I will do my very best to keep working on upping that amount that a person with disabilities who is eligible for the disability benefit can get. My timer's going off, so I'm going to stop talking and throw it over to George.
Thank you. And I'll just repeat the question. For George Wedge from Scarborough-Warburn for the NDP, what will your party do if elected for people with disabilities in Canada?
Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Leanne, for that intro. Appreciate that. Thank you. So my name is George Wedge. Everyone in the room, some may know me, some may not, from the work that I do on the Catholic District School Board Special Education Advisory Committee. I'm a very passionate person when it comes to disabilities, being the father of 2 children with special needs and having to fight for their advocate rights their entire life, whether it's in school, whether it's in social events with Boy Scouts, no matter what it was. If I didn't open the door for them, they would not have gotten in. So that's the tireless effort that I do. I understand the needs of the community. I understand how it is that every time you go to a door, it seems to be closed and you need help to open it. That's not right. People with disabilities in Canada can open the door themselves. They just need the opportunity. So that's why I'm running. The New Democrats are committed. We are committed to tackling the cost of living crisis, including by doubling this new Canada Disability Benefit, ending unfair clawbacks of the benefit and making it easier to access. We've been consistent in saying that the $200 a month benefit the Liberals introduced is insufficient to meet the increasingly demanding pressures that the disability community is feeling more and more. The NDP is committed to strengthening Canada's Accessibility Act. This includes implementing the proposed regulation and ASEC 28, accessible ready housing to ensure that the affordable housing we build can accommodate people with disabilities and to reduce the cost of making housing accessible. In taking steps to make Canada more accessible for those living with hearing loss or deafness, this community will be at the heart of our policy development process. We'll be drawing on the latest data and working hand in hand with organizations like yours that promote accessibility rights. When it comes to the 8 million people in Canada that are disabled, there are no partisan politics. We must partner and bend every ear in Ottawa every day we can to make sure that a disability in Canada is the same as choosing the color of a car. It makes no difference in our society, fully integrated and fully included in all ways, shapes, and forms. That's what voting for the NDP will get you. Thanks. A vote for me is a vote for you.
Thank you. And now we're going to turn to the first of our pre-submitted questions. And it's on a topic that you've already addressed, but it's a very specific one on that topic. So here's the question. Will you agree to increase the Canada Disability Benefit to at least $1,000 to $2,000 per month, tax-free, for all persons with disabilities to help pull them out of poverty? I think just to mix up the order a little bit, we'll start with Leanne, if that's okay.
Is this 90 seconds?
Yes,
Okay, I'll start my timer.
thank you.
If it was up to me, Leanne Kotler, I would open up the coffers and of course I would up that $200 amount. I'm a candidate running in Thornhill against Melissa Landsman. I really hope to make it to Ottawa. If I'm given the task of finance minister, which is highly unlikely, I would really do that. I would up the amount monthly. I think the question of will I increase it to $2,000 a month is a question for Mark Carney and for the finance minister. But if I were prime minister or finance minister, of course I would increase that amount to a level that lifts people out of poverty. I would certainly do that. But I don't want to sit here and make a false promise. I want to say that this is a start. It's a new part of our social safety net. We're starting at a very low amount of $200 a month, and I'm going to push and push and push to increase that. When healthcare came into effect in Canada as a universal healthcare issue, it started small and it became a universal healthcare social safety net that we enjoy. Are there holes in it? Yes. And is my timer's going off? And is $200 not enough? I agree. I do want to just quickly say that when I was asked to come and be on this debate, I thought, what is there to debate about disability issues? I think we can all agree that we want to live in a barrier-free world, and we want that amount that comes to people living with disabilities to be much, much more.
Thank you for that. I'll say as a fellow journalist in our proficiency with math, I think finance minister is probably unlikely. I wouldn't nominate myself, but you never know. Next, we'll ask the same question from Mike Morris. And the question again was, will you agree to increase the Canada Disability Benefit to at least $1,000 to $2,000 per month tax-free for all persons with disabilities to help pull them out of poverty?
David, we shouldn't even have to have this conversation. This was promised by the party that governed before the last election. That's what was supposed to happen in this session of Parliament. And it wasn't supposed to be blocked behind the disability tax credit the way it currently is. In the legislation, section 11 of the legislation, I know I got that amendment through, says it's supposed to be barrier-free. The disability tax credit is a barrier another application to even be qualifying for the up to $200, it starts going down as soon as you start making $24,000 or more. These are all barriers. And so, of course, if Greens are elected in communities across the country, and for my part, if I'm reelected in Kitchener Center, I'll be going back to Ottawa to continue to fight with the disability community to not just fully fund the Canada Disability Benefit, to lift hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty the way that was promised, but to end legislated poverty for all folks with disabilities, which includes fixing the benefit. It should be tied to individual income, for example, not household income the way it currently is, because a person with a disability deserves that level of dignity and independence. I'm out of time, but we need to fix and fully fund the Canada Disability Benefit.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to George Wedge from the NDP. George, do you want me to repeat the question or are you okay?
I remember it. But you can repeat it if you want to. Okay, so first of all, straight out of the gate, the NDP is already committed to doubling the benefit. How do we get to $1,000? So that's not something that's out of our realm, but the NDP is committed to bringing costs down to try to meet the income levels of persons with disability in Canada. We're proposing to go for a grocery cap for staple items. We're looking at rent control. We're looking at controlling who owns the apartment buildings that a lot of low income earners live in, so that we can control their rent. It's not right that making money for people to live, it's not right that that's an actual business. People deserve to have a roof over their head, and they shouldn't have to pay 90% of their income tax. So that's what we're going to do. I don't need the full 90 seconds, thanks.
Great. And now we are going to ask the people here in attendance if anybody has a question.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. My name is Jamie Peddle, and I'm the founder of Canadian Autism Treatment for Medicare Coalition. We are the only autism coalition here in Ontario who believes in the science of autism treatment, that autism treatment should belong into the Ministry of Health and not the Ministry of Children, Community, Social Services. In 2016, the Liberal Party of Canada held a national convention in Winnipeg, which over 2,200 delegates overwhelmingly voted in favor to fund autism treatment. The Liberal Party of Canada has since ignored this resolution, despite Justin Trudeau having said, and I quote him, "How we care for the most vulnerable people in our society is very important." This is what Mr. Trudeau had said. In the United States of America, they have federal laws that protect people with all disabilities in healthcare and education, and even believe that autism treatment is medically necessary. And I will name just some of these laws. One of them is called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And the other one is the Americans with Disability Act, for example. So, my question for you is, what will your party do if elected in putting in policies for all disabilities in healthcare and education? And what would some of those policies be? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Since I guess it was aimed at the Liberal Party, which was in power and maybe in power again, and maybe not, we'll see. If it's okay, we'll start again with you, Leanne, and then we'll go to the others.
I think the disability lens has to be everywhere. when we're considering an announcement on childcare, we have to, for example, think about the provisions for children with disabilities. When we're talking about food security, when we're talking about housing, there should always be a strategy with an accessibility component. I, if elected, will advocate for that particular lens whenever there's an announcement coming out from any ministry. I will say that we do have, coming into the next session of Parliament, we have a what's called a disability officer, a chief accessibility officer for the Government of Canada. And it puts in place a lot of it puts in place a mindset that Canada is a country that is looking to have that perspective and to communicate to our citizens that persons with disabilities are more than just their disability. They're individuals with skills, with talents, with personality that is way beyond their disability. So I think what I would try to do in Ottawa would be to break down not just physical barriers, but attitudinal barriers. I wasn't timing that, so I think my
You hit it perfectly, and we're gonna leave it there for that, and we're gonna ask George Wedge if there's anything you would like to say to that question.
Absolutely. Did you say your name was JP?
Jamie Kyle.
Jamie, okay, Jamie. When you said autism and Medicare, you nailed it. 100%. As a parent of two kids with autism, I couldn't understand why it was I was going in the pocket every year, $40,000 to $60,000, paying for therapy for my own kids for something they were born with that was a recognized disability. But somebody else with cerebral palsy or someone with epilepsy or something like that, covered under Medicare, covered everything. I couldn't get that. If I'm elected, when I'm elected as an MP in Ottawa, I can promise you and the entire autism community all across Canada a tireless effort to make exactly that happen. I will be the guy they'll hate in the NDP caucus because I won't stop talking about it. It's not right. It's just not right. I've lived it. My family's lived it. Your family's lived it. And I'm pointing at you, who is it, Jennifer, right? You're living it right now. I have people in my community that live it. I have people on the campaign trail that live it. It has to stop. And I can make that promise to my constituents. I will be the guy.
And Mike, thank you. Mike Morris, do you have anything you want to say to that question?
Maybe just briefly to share what I heard in the question, will you be listening to me apply this lens across decision making? And so, Jamie, I think something that I saw in Parliament these last number of years is the words were used often, nothing about us without. And then on the disability benefit, for example, they would use those words, and then when the final decisions get made, it was the exact opposite. Nothing that was in there was asked for from the disability community. And it seemed like all it was just stalling and stalling until the budget amount finally got. And so what I can commit and what Greens focus on is listening to our communities to then focus on addressing what we hear. The reason I got involved in addressing and pushing for the disability benefit in the first place is I knocked on doors. And I learned from folks in my community what it's like to live on ODSP and legislative poverty. And I learned from them the weight of legislative poverty. And they are the reason why I then went to Ottawa and advocated for the disability benefit. They are the reason the original commitment was made in the first place. But what, in my view, needs to happen far more is that, Jamie, your voice, whether it's as a caregiver or for folks with disabilities, need to be centered every step of the way. MPs are doing their job, that's what they're meant to be doing, not just using those words in blanket, false ways.
Thank you. And we will come back to the floor, but right now we're going to go to questions via Zoom. And here's Gary.
So first of all, thank you to everybody for the questions on Zoom. I've been compiling the most popular. The first ones, there is currently a 40-year waiting list for deeply affordable supportive housing for those with developmental disabilities across the country. In the 2017 National Housing Strategy, the Government of Canada made the commitment to build 2,400 units for this vulnerable community. We are not even at 50% at this point. What will you and your party do to close the gap?
And I think we will start with George, if that's okay.
Thank you, David, and thanks for the question from Zoom. So the waiting list I've heard about. I have some people in my constituency that I spoke with, Kevin and Joanna, and they have two kids, two boys with autism. And one of them was behaviors that were quite threatening in the home. So they had in their area, 15-year wait list to get their son into assisted living. And they couldn't wait 15 years because they're 65 years old. And their son was apt to push them down the stairs or hit them or do something violent. So the only route they had was to have their son arrested. And they had to make that terrible decision to have their son arrested so that he could be put into assisted living. 40-year wait list is ridiculous. It's what we live with. But 2 days ago, Jugby committed to building 3 million new affordable houses in the next 6 years, 5 years. That's 600,000 homes a year. I am absolutely sure that there's a space in there to bring that wait list down to a year, 2 years, something minimalistic. And that's what we can commit to. We can talk about that and find a way to put that into the project.
Thank you. And next we will go to Leanne Cotton from the Liberal Party.
A 40-year waiting list, it's just absurd. It's just, in some ways, it's beyond comprehension. And not as a would-be parliamentarian, but as a Canadian, I'm ashamed at that. And I'm saddened by it. What I do know is that Mark Carney is committed to building houses and building homes, something that we haven't seen in this country since post-World War II. I hope that somehow with this extraordinary building that will take place in the coming years, that 40-year waiting list goes down to 0. I think that we have a tough road ahead of us to build the housing for not just persons with disabilities, but for people who are living in encampments in parks. We see now that it's spring, there are more tents in parks around the city of Toronto. We have to do more. And I'm not just talking as a Liberal Party member, but I think as Canadians, as Green Party members, NDPers, Bloc Quebecois, Conservatives, we all need to come together and we all need to find solutions to bring that appalling waiting list down to nothing.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mike Morris from the Green.
Well, I agree with Leanne, but you know, it wasn't always like this. Back in the 70s, 40% of all housing starts had federal money attached. And as of 1995, it cratered. It's been 3 decades that have led us to this housing crisis. And of course, folks with disabilities on the front lines of it. There's 3 things that should be done immediately. Number 1, stop giving federal money to build housing we can't afford. The lobbyists have gotten into the definition of affordable housing at CMHC. And now what happens is if you want to build housing, well, 70% of the units you can charge whatever you want with no accessibility criteria. The other 30%, The only criteria is it has to be 30% of market average rent.
Yeah.
In Kitchener, that's completely.
Hey, there you are.
That-
Hold
that's
on, let
true
me get
in
'em.
Toronto as well.
Put myself on silence here.
It's why I introduced motion 170 to change the definition so the existing money goes to build the affordable and accessible housing we need. Secondly, we need to get the funding back up toward the bottom of the G7 for social housing. If we doubled the social housing stock, we'd still be middle of the pack. And third, we need to end the tax breaks for corporate investors that are buying up units, rent-evicting folks, and increasing rents. That means the real estate investment trust, for example, end their tax break, use that money to build the housing that folks with disabilities and those on low income actually need.
Thank you. And now we're going to go to our next pre-submitted question, although the one I have here is about housing accessibility. So instead, I'm going to ask my own, which is the United States and to a degree in Canada, we're seeing a drumbeat about repealing or reversing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also talked about in terms of stopping woke culture. Do you think that kind of push, if it becomes part of government policy, poses any hazards for disabled people and those fighting for their equality rights? I'll start with George.
Thanks for the question, Dave. The answer to that is absolutely 100% yes. If anybody tinkers with our DEI or doesn't advance our DEI efforts in Canada, it's going to set back disability communities and other leveraged communities in Canada. It's going to set us back decades. It's taken us this long to get this close to equality, let alone 10 years off to equity. Anybody goes near that, and it's extremely harmful for Canada. And it's not just the 27% of people with disabilities in Canada. It's 20% of the perilous employees in Canada, the ones that are making low wages because of their identities and other things like that. It will set us back. Look, I'm at DP. I know about working class. Everything that we have today is built on 150 years of labor movements, pushing big government to make changes that are good for the working class person. That includes DEI, that includes identity, that includes all of those things. Taking us back 150 years in time undoes the work for people that immigrated to Canada, got a good job in Canada, joined a union in Canada, made government make the changes they need to advance the common person's agenda in big government. There's a party that's not here tonight, and I'm saying to you, that speaks volumes on this topic.
Thank you. Leanne Cotler.
Well, it's said that when America sneezes, Canada gets the flu. And I am very worried about the influence south of the border. I think that when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's something that defines us as Canadians. We are a multicultural society, and we are a multi-able society. People living with disabilities, those who are able, those who are new to Canada. We are building an inclusive society, and this is what being Canadian means to me. So I think that we have to really, really strive to keep those policies in place.
We have a technical problem. I'm going to let you continue. Just wait 1 second.
Sure.
Please continue. Sorry about that.
Did you hear any of my answer or most of it?
It was all perfectly audible. It was a problem with the visual display.
Okay, so when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that's a component of the Canadian character of who we are. This country is built on a multiplicity of former nationalities around the world. And we need to keep striving for more equity, more inclusion, more diversity. When Donald Trump was first elected, I went to the Women's March in Washington, where there were 1 million women with their pink hats holding placards. And one of the placards that stood out the most for me was an older woman holding a sign that said, "I can't believe I still have to protest this shit." So I just want to know that we as Canadians are going to keep moving forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And as a Liberal member of Parliament, I will hold our government to account to make sure we do not slide into what's going on into the US.
Thank you. And Mike Morris, please.
Yeah, thanks.
That's
for the
one
question.
person we know, Chris.
I think those of us who care
Not
about
aggressive.
reducing
Oh,
barriers
it's terrible.
for those who are experiencing them across the country need to recognize and help Canadians see that inclusion, like rights, are not a pie.
Before.
When
Jay,
one
if I
person
could-
gets more rights and another is more included.
Did it before,
someone
honey.
else
You
doesn't
did it
have-
before with her.
I am sorry to interrupt. Can everybody on Zoom be muted, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. So rights and inclusion are not like a pie. When one person gets more rights, someone else doesn't lose them. And I think, David, what you're referring to are some in the US who are playing on the politics of fear to convince people that that is not the case. And I think as Canadians, we are better than that. And folks like myself who've held elected office, and particularly as someone who doesn't experience those barriers, need to be amplifying the voices of those who do, so that we don't backslide at a time when we should be going faster and further and not the opposite.
Thank you. And now time for another question with the audience. I'll hand it over to Gary.
Not visible here. Can everyone see me? Yes, great. My name is Gary Malkowski. I am the program director for Deaf Accessible Strategies. We have founded a housing barrier-free program for the deaf. It's a coalition where there are 17 different groups across the country connected and focused solely on accessible housing. Currently, the housing crisis is serious and worse for disabled and deaf folks. We want more people to register and recognize that accessible housing is a priority and an urgent concern. There's 410,000 Canadians who are deaf, who use sign and are culturally deaf identified, who need accessible housing. That's a lot, and we are so behind in terms of the building projects for this group of people. For example, visual fire alarms. You can't just have a smoke detector that doesn't show lights when you have a deaf person in the room. It's dangerous and it's life and death. Avoiding making building codes accessible and including universal design principles is dangerous. We need to have universal design principles. I have sent a letter from our coalition to the NDP, which is my favorite party, and we are waiting for their official response. We haven't yet received it, but we have asked the questions about what we expect for the deaf folks. And I guess my question for all parties is how can you all commit to accessible housing for people with disabilities, whatever that looks like, whether you're in a wheelchair, you're deaf, you are at different heights and whatnot? What would you all say?
Thank you for the question. George Wedge, since the NDP was referenced there, I'm not going to ask you for the official answer right now, but I would appreciate you asking the question as best you can. Thank you.
So thanks. That was a great question. And so accessible housing is interesting. I actually had a really cool opportunity to go to my local garage and hang out with my buddy named Dan. And he introduced me to a guy yesterday by the name of Ian, and he said, this guy used to be, he's a retired law enforcement guy, and now he designs accessible houses. And I asked him, I said, well, what's that all about? And he said, well, here's the thing. It doesn't matter when you buy your house, how old you are, you're eventually going to be disabled. So why doesn't every house have certain features that are built into it to aid you in your future life, or have some sort of systems that are built into it that are interchangeable easily for whatever disability may come your way in your future? I think that's a great idea. And if we're going to be building 3 million houses anyway, why don't we look at that? And I think that's a great idea. And I think that's something that I would be proud to bring to caucus and propose. Because if we're doing it, we might as well do it right the first time. So that's where I am at. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Leanne next.
I had a bit of trouble hearing the question. Can you just, in a nutshell, give me the nuts and bolts of the question?
I feel like, yeah, I'll please, yeah. We're just gonna have a quick summary of the question, but I don't feel the best persons, please. Oh. Yeah, sorry about that.
How will your party commit to building homes with universal accessible design from the beginning? How will you make that commitment, including universal design principles?
That's a great question. I think that what we need to do is, with the housing announcement that Mark Carney unveiled on Monday, a week ago, we need to see that there is a component that allocates a certain amount of money for the accessibility part of the equation. When I was at TVO, I oversaw the production of a documentary that showed how a man, his name is Luke, who was in a cycling accident and was lived in a wheelchair, how he went round to stores. He built these wedges that were just the same height as the step that was blocking him from going into a coffee shop. So with a bunch of friends, he got together and took the initiative to build these wedges that allowed him to go into a coffee shop. And it's just this small little idea of just this small wedge that allowed him to go into shops in his neighborhood. And I think what we need to do is we need to open up the solutions to Canadians. We always look to government for the solutions, but we need input from more Canadians as to what exactly a house that is completely barrier-free looks like. We need to come up with that framework, and we need to ask those questions within government and also outside of government, because the solutions are out there. We just need to put them together in a way that is doable.
Okay, and we're gonna go to Mike from the Green Party. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Gary, thank you for the question. We need to change the National Building Code to make universal design mandatory in all new buildings. It is government's responsibility. The disability community has made clear what is required. They need to follow through. If you want a bit of an exercise in frustration, I submitted a petition on this in Parliament a couple of years ago. You can find 9 paragraphs of the governing party in the last session essentially saying no thanks. It's petition, I just looked it up. It's E4543. It's clear that the disability community will need to push harder on whichever party forms government next time to make clear enough is enough. The National Building Code needs to be updated to ensure universal design is built in.
Thank you. And now we're going to take a question from Zoom, so I'm going to hand it to Gary.
Thank you very much. Next question. Will your party repeal Track 2 of MAID, medical assistance in dying, and invest heavily in proper housing, healthcare, and basic life supports.
We'll start with Leanne for that one from the Liberal Party. Thank you.
Okay, I heard part of the question. I know it has to do with medical assistance in dying, but could you please repeat the question?
Absolutely. Will your party repeal Track 2 of MAID, medical assistance in dying, and invest heavily in proper housing, healthcare, and basic life supports?
Absolutely. The anecdotes we've heard about medical assistance in dying have been appalling. A way to clear a hospital bed, or a way to get someone off the books. It's awful. And yes, of course, we have medical assistance in dying in Canada, and have we got it right? No, not completely. Does it need improvement? Absolutely. And I, in Ottawa, will absolutely pressure our government to increase the disability benefit so that the life of someone who has a disability is not so awful that the alternative is, well, if I have medical assistance in dying, my suffering will be over. That is not good enough. We need to do better. We need to make sure that medical assistance in dying is not an option for someone who is unhoused, because what the solution is for someone who's unhoused is housing, not medical assistance in dying.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Mike Morris from the Green Party.
Some of you may know that I raised this in Parliament about a year and a half ago to the Prime Minister directly, and I was heckled by colleagues for doing so. I'm proud that Greens are actually the only party who responded to the UN report just a few weeks ago to make it clear that we support their recommendation that we should be repealing Track 2 MAID for those for whom a death is not naturally foreseeable. And I would agree with Leanne insofar as, of course, we should be doing far more to help folks with disabilities live well rather than expanding MAID to make it easier to die. And that's why we will continue to fight for the Canada Disability Benefit, for housing, for healthcare, for all that the disability community has continued to call for. And my hope is, with this report from the UN, it will be a stronger call that the media might pay more attention to it when we need to be mindful of the realities of Track 2 MAID and the concerns that the disability community has been trying to raise around it for years.
Thank you. And George Wedge from the NDP.
So thank you for that question. It's one that I am a little emotional hearing it because I have some personal experience with medically assisted death. So I don't know what my party's position on it, so I'm not going to say what the NDP will do. I know that the NDP is all about hope and all about life and dignity. So I know that if this was a case of people looking to end their life because of misery and suffering, because they're homeless or suffering in the community, socially, I know that the party that I stand with would not be good with that. And they would look to solve the problem, not end the life. But I had an uncle, and he had a disease in his legs that was so horrific. It was as if his legs were inside him. I don't know what it's called, and I can't imagine the suffering he went through. He eventually made the decision that he couldn't do it any longer. And I respect his decision because I don't know his pain. So it's a very emotional topic for me. And then I turn directly to something that's directly related to this, which is a person with perilous employment. He's a gig worker. He's exploited by perilous, he's underemployed. Okay, underemployed, we'll call it that. He's a gig worker and he's exploited by some of the largest gig corporations in Canada, an industry that's been highly unregulated by the government over the last 15 years. And it exploits workers in the worst ways. Talk about your legislated poverty. I was part of a report that we put out last year for the city of Toronto and the province of Ontario to understand that there's 20% of their entire working class in Ontario is making less than $6.50 an hour
I'm gonna
at
have
the
to,
hands of gig companies.
I'm gonna have to cut off there. Thank you. The next question is from the pre-submitted, and it's on the topic of representation and advocacy. The question is, would you support within your party the creation of an ombudsman or advocate for disabled people to address systemic issues at the federal level? And we'll start with Leanne.
We have that accessibility officer position that the Liberal government, before Parliament was dissolved, created. It's the Chief Accessibility Officer, and that is the exact role that person will have. So yes, absolutely, that person has to advocate for people living with disabilities. People living with disabilities will be able to go directly to that office. Advocacy groups will be able to go to that office. This is just the beginning. The Chief Accessibility Officer is just the beginning. This story of people living with disabilities is not unheard anymore. These are voices that I am bringing to Parliament Hill, that my colleagues on this panel are going to advocate for. So regardless of what party we belong to, I'd like to think of this evening as more of a discussion than a debate. And regardless of the outcome of this election, I would like to work with Mike and George and keep these stories and keep advocating for people with disabilities, because we have a long way to go. We really, really do. This is Canada. This is a country with an abundance of natural resources, an abundance of natural wealth. It's absurd that people with disabilities have to live below the poverty line. It's just not. Sorry?
That's okay. I'm going to stop you there, and we're going to go to George from the NDP.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you support within your party the creation of an ombudsman or advocate for disabled people to address systemic issues within the federal system?
I would absolutely support that, and I would push my caucus to create it. Even though the Liberals have put something in place, I don't know that it's going to work. And the reason that we need to have a ministry or an office dedicated totally to this is the only other real route that a member of the community would have would be to go to their local MP and see if that local MP could give them some advice or some assistance or point them in the right direction. Well, I did that for 21 years, and I can tell you, I never got anything. Nothing. So unless there's actually an office in Ottawa under a ministry that's totally dedicated to the advocacy and rights of persons with disabilities in Canada, there's no governance, there's no oversight, and there's no advancement. So I would take it the extra step. I would advise our caucus that we need a dedicated ministry that has direct reach to the public, so you don't have to go through an MP to have a direct line every time. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, David. I think your question is asking about within the parties. And so I can answer that question directly. I'm the disability critic for the Green Party. It's an idea I hadn't heard before, but I think it's one that merits further understanding. And so for the person who asked if they would like to see that happen in the Green Party, if this is coming from the disability community, I would just encourage that person to reach out directly for me to understand the idea better and then present it to the leadership within the Green Party. It sounds really well considered, and I think would help each party to better formulate their ideas around the needs of the disability community before they bring it forward. And so I would, support exploring it.
Thank you. Now we have a chance to take another question from the floor. I'll let Gary get the microphone and we'll see what people say.
Hello, my name is Sharon, and I remember that when I was younger, all disabled kids were supposed to grow up with a disability. When I'm a senior, I realized that a lot of people who are seniors still got disabilities, a lot more are becoming more disabled. I'm finding that it's kind of discrimination against seniors with disabilities by government, places like plan your assistive devices, you're on ODSP, everything is covered. When you're a senior, nothing is covered. Maybe you'll get 2/4 of it covered, but the rest of it you have to pay. You have to pay for 5 batteries. You have to pay $80 for your. Well, what would you do something about that? To make sure that since we're in poverty too, that we do not have to pay for all that by ourselves.
So so the question about how to help seniors with disabilities, especially financially with the various costs that they have. And I'll start with Mike from the Green Party.
Thank you for the question. I meant to share on the earlier one, we talked about how the US is influencing us. Mr. Carney got rid of the Minister for People with Disabilities. Just to be clear about titles, folks with disabilities being heard, that was a position that existed in cabinet in the Liberal Party before and no longer exists today. And I think it's something we need to push to see changed regardless of who forms government in the next election. To address your question directly, it was one of the amendments I brought forward to the Canada Disability Benefit Act because the CDB ends at 65. One of the amendments I attempted to bring forward was to end that cutoff. And what the minister said to me at the time was, Mike, we don't need that. We don't have seniors in this country who are living in poverty. Because we've got OAS and GIS and it's all just fine. That's on the parliamentary record. You can find it for yourself. And to me, that is just completely not the reality of folks I speak with, seniors in my community, seniors with disabilities in my community. It's one more example of where the Canada Disability Benefit needs to be fixed. A disability doesn't end at 65. The CDB shouldn't either.
Thank you. And we'll go to the end partner from the Liberal Party.
I agree. You know, the Canada Disability is $200 a month on Parliament Hill. I would advocate for it to be more. When it comes to seniors, Prime Minister Carney just announced benefits during this very troubling time for seniors watching their life savings in the stock market plummet. So there is some relief there. With respect to the ministry that doesn't exist anymore, I recently spoke to Carla Qualtrough, who was the former Liberal Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability and Inclusion. That is too much of a mouthful. There needs to be a ministry for people living with disabilities. And on Parliament Hill, I will advocate for that.
Thank you. George Wedge from the NDP.
Thank you. This is, in this respect, a non-partisan discussion right now because we're all in agreement that seniors are living in poverty and they should. The NDP, of course, we know workers and we know about pensions and we know about what it is to be a senior today, living in poverty, and I get to enjoy the Canada that you built, and I'm making a great salary, and I'm building a pension plan that's supposed to work for me in the future. I'm not a fool. The same thing that happened to you is going to happen to me when I get to be retired. Everything I thought that I had planned won't be enough. So there's no doubt in my mind that an NDP party, my party, we will look at that. We already know that the disability benefit needs to be doubled. But that's before we start to talk about Canada Pension Plan, and we start to talk about the old age pension. Those things are ridiculously low. The federal government has thought that that's enough money for far too long, though we know it's not. In caucus, the NDP will examine that very closely and find a way to treat those who built the Canada we live in with the respect and dignity they deserve.
Thank you. And we're going to take another question from the floor, this time from David Lepofsky. The microphone's coming. It'll just be there in 1 second.
Moderator? Moderator?
Yes.
There's been a lot of people with other hands up in the chat. If you could ask them the next time too, that would be excellent.
I'll leave that up to Gary, but that he got the message. Thank you.
With apologies, based on time, this will be the last question. We took a sampling of questions from people within the chat, and David Lepofsky has a question he feels is important for the. Okay.
I'm no relation to that guy who spoke about an hour and a half ago. My question is for the Liberal and NDP candidates, because the Green Party candidate actually already answered it. So, as I said at the outset, 28 organizations, disability community organizations, reflecting a diverse spectrum of disability, has written all the party leaders asking them to make a three-part Accessible Canada plan to ensure the effective implementation of the Accessible Canada Act, tearing down the barriers we face, to end the horrific mistreatment of air passengers with disabilities, and to lift people with disabilities out of poverty. Now, the Liberal and NDP representatives here are not in a position unilaterally to commit to party. We understand. But what you can commit to, what I'd like to ask you to commit to, two things. Number one, will you commit to contact your party leader and ask them to make the Accessible Canada pledge? And second, will you let us know that you did make that contact? Whatever conversations you have in private, but you can call them and you can tell us that you did. But would you, I want to know from the Liberal and NDP candidates, would you agree to do that for your party leader?
Thank you, David. We'll go to George Wedge from the NDP first.
Thanks for that question, Dave. The answer is absolutely yes. I'm going to go through my organizer and see if I can arrange, well, I know I'm going to have a meeting with Jugmeet at some point in the campaign. But if I can get my organizer to arrange a phone call with him, I will absolutely ask that question for you at first opportunity. And I will absolutely report back to you what is responsible.
Thank you. And Leanne from the Liberal Party.
I will certainly have Mark Carney's ear if I'm elected to Parliament. I will certainly advocate. I apologize, I didn't hear half of the question. I think there was something about passengers. Sorry, I'm sorry, but I didn't hear part of the question. But part of what I did hear was, will I go to the seat of power and advocate for you, and then will I report back that I actually did do that? Yes, I will do that. If there's part of your question that I haven't answered, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, just 1 second. Thank you.
Leanne, it's David Lepofsky.
Hi.
I'm asking if you will contact your party leader during the campaign and ask him or advocate to him to make the Accessible Canada pledge we've requested. And then let us know if you had that conversation. I'm not asking you to disclose the content.
Okay. I will do my very best to contact Mark Carney and advocate. I can't make any promises. He's a difficult guy to have a sit down with at this time in the campaign. But if I do manage to have a moment with him, I will definitely do that, and I will let you know if I've been able to have that conversation with him.
Thank you. I'm going to say a big apology to all the people online who did have questions, and unfortunately, we have run out of time. We're now at the close of our debate. I want to thank everybody, including the candidates. I'd like to think that the federal leaders debate is going to be as respectful and collegial. Something tells me it will not be, even though a lot of Canadians would love to see it. Also, thanks to all the organizers, and especially all the people here who helped make it as accessible and respectful as possible. We're now going to end with a 1-minute conclusion from each candidate with the following prompt. Why should we vote for your party in this election? So here's your chance to wrap up, and we'll start with George Wedge.
Thank you for that. The NDP party is the only party that's progressive enough to recognize the diverse needs of the disability community in Canada. Why? Because we are the disability community in Canada. We're made up of families that have disabilities, just like everybody in the room and just like everybody who's out there watching. Every part of my life is touched by disability and many, many other people. We've seen what's happened with past governments, and we've never got to where we are today. Why do you think voting for the red or the blue will be different this time? It won't be. I didn't mention green because I intend to do a lot of work with this gentleman when I'm in Ottawa. But that's why you need to vote NDP. 8 million voices in Canada is a lot of voices. You control this election. You will choose the next government. And if you don't choose the one who's the most progressive, you won't get the full gains of a progressive government. So that's why I'm saying you need to vote NDP.
Thank you. And Mike Morris from the Green Party.
Yeah, thank you, David. George, I welcome the chance to work with you. I will be clear though, as Greens, we don't make up votes for the disability community. I'm glad the NDP wants to double the Canada Disability Benefit. It's not what I'm hearing from the disability community. The disability community wants to end legislative poverty for folks with disabilities. And so going to the question, I would just put forward that when you elect Greens, you elect champions for your community. And there are folks with disabilities in every community of this country. And by electing that person, you will see that what happened in this last session of Parliament would continue, but with that much more political weight in Ottawa, with that much more pressure for whoever forms government to work with others. No one person does any of this by themselves, but to work with others to get meaningful results in place of partisan sniping for the disability community.
Thank you. And to Leanne Cotler from the Liberal Party.
My colleagues on the panel, Mike and George, you two have the luxury of theory. It's theoretical. I do not have the luxury of the theoretical. I have the reality of the fact that the Liberal government has actually implemented the Canada Disability. I know it's $200 a month. I know it's not enough. But the Liberal government has actually done something. And what we hope to achieve and what the Liberal government has set out to do is create a barrier-free Canada by 2040. It sounds like a long way away, but this is actual plans that are being implemented. They are not theoretical. And how are we going to put into place this action plan, we're going to do it through employment for people with disabilities, financial security for people with disabilities, accessible communities, and accessible government. Those are 4 things that are actually in place and implemented so that people living with disabilities in Canada can live with autonomy, with dignity, with self-determination, so that we can have a Canada that is really inclusive, really and truly inclusive. The Liberal government has 4 action plans in place, and I will make sure that they are implemented.
That ends our evening. I am asked to remind everybody to vote, to thank once again everybody for being here in our line, and I'm going to turn it over to Gary Gladstone to do stakeholder relations from Marina.
Good evening and thank you very much. First of all, to those of you on the chat that did not have your questions answered, there are approximately 300 people on chat, and we took a sampling of all questions from everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for tonight, and I'd like to point out in particular Susan DeCarry, the CEO of CNIB, and Lee Bolger from CNIB for your staff have been absolutely incredible in dealing with all of the last minute issues, particularly transitioning to Leanne to come online. And Leanne, thank you very much. I'm sure it wasn't very easy. David, you are an exceptional moderator. Thank you very much. George Wedge from the NDP, Scarborough-Woburn, Leanne Cockler from the Liberal Party in Thornhill, and Mike Morris from the Green Party, Kitchener Centre. Thank you, and thank you for coming out and participating. The charities and not-for-profits that formed our coalition, as I mentioned when we did the provincial debate, you're all incredible. All we had to do is ask and everybody delivered. So thank you tremendously. Now for the important part. Everybody, April 28th is E-Day and advance voting is April 18th to 21st. Everyone here and online has a say and must have a say, and we encourage everybody to vote. With that, thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Those of you celebrating Easter and Passover, wish you the best.